we're so used to like digital, almost like endless amount of space.
Not now.
Yeah.
This is what I love about doing things this way. So anyway,
Chris just turned the cassette over. We loved it.
So is Tom still with like Epitaph or Anti, or is it the same thing?
I think they're the same, really, Epitaph.
They're off of Sunset or something, right? Don't they have like a building off of Sunset Boulevard or around?
Probably. I've never been to their place.
I used to go there every week when I was a delivery driver.
Oh, okay.
I was a truck driver.
Oh, then
I dropped milk off, and I was like, one day these motherfuckers will know how brilliant my music is.
That's right, baby.
And I just,
That's right.
I was like, here's your order. Like, here's your apples and shit.
Oh yeah.
All their half gallons of organic milk.
I probably used to deliver their LA Times.
Yeah, they didn't even look at me.
Several years back.
Just put it in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, yep, sir, thank you. Yeah, I had a LA Times delivery route.
Right.
Mine was the peninsula of Naples.
Oh, really?
It was the worst fucking route, man, because nobody wanted it. Because this is why I got it. You have to drive down each thing is a dead end. You got to pull in.
Yeah.
It's a dead end. Then you have to back out and pull into the next one, and that's a dead end. And then you got to go all the way down. You do it on like 30 streets.
Yeah.
And then you go around and you make a U-turn and you do it on the other side.
Oh, I know. I grew up down there.
It's the worst shit.
It's the craziest place in Long Beach. Yeah. They'll drive you nuts, man.
I'll tell you what though. I did kind of love that job only because I like having gigs where I get to do stuff when nobody else is doing it.
Oh yeah.
Like
you are up at the butt crack of dawn.
Yeah. I was up at like 1 or 2 in the morning. I would drive from Long Beach to basically like Wilmington, Compton. I'd load up. I had a Volkswagen Golf GTI or something hatchback. I'd have to wrap all my papers.
Yeah.
They had that old ass machine where you'd fold the paper over and you'd run it through, and that thing would like tie a knot so that the paper stayed closed.
Yeah, I remember that string.
Yes, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do.
So I'd do that. I'd load up my car and I'd take off. And then the cool thing is I wouldn't have to go back, right? When the route's done, you just go home.
Yeah.
But then on Sundays, it was like fucking 10 times the number of normal, papers. So they also covered them, like it was like raining, so they like covered them in like a plastic bag. And man, I remember one time, the first time I did it, I opened the hatchback of the Golf, and they all fucking fell out the back because there's no friction.
Oh, they're sliding.
Yeah, they're just sliding everywhere. And so I'm standing there in the rain, looking at like 100 or 200 like Sunday
editions.
Like,
they each weigh about 5 pounds.
And I was just like, why am I doing
the bags
this?
are filling up with water. Now each one weighs 10 or 15 pounds.
And I'm like driving around, the peninsula, and there was a I don't know if it was there when you were younger, but there was a bakery in Naples in the peninsula, and I would, about halfway through that route, they would be up and baking, in the middle of the night. They'd leave the door open, and smelling that bread at like 3 or 4 in the morning was like unreal, man. It was just because everything was crisp and clear and quiet. And I never got, I never like stopped in and was like, hey, because they're still baking it, but I remember having that job. I think I did it for a couple months. And one time it was like 6 in the morning, and I'm listening to a show called Morning Glory that used to be on KCRW. It was like all gospel music.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they start playing like Rance Allen, like Ain't No Need of Crying or something. I'm like wrapping up, the sun's coming up, and I just lost it, man. I'm like crying, like, the whole way home. Like I drop off my last few papers, and I'm just like, it was just such a powerful experience.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted and I'm stressed out. I think if I remember right, my son, Elisha, my ex-wife was pregnant with Elisha, and I'd taken a second job to try to help make ends meet. And
sure.
It was just such a rough period of my life, man. But
I know, man. I know.
That's kind of wild.
The sun is just peeking up.
The sun's coming up, and I'm like listening to this beautiful gospel music, and it's like encouraging me, and it's also like 10 times sadder because of like what I'm doing,
Oh no,
I wonder,
you, man.
I wonder sometimes, one time I got asked to talk at Cal State Long Beach to their composition students, and I told them, like, I'm not, fucking around, but like, I would suggest getting like a manual labor job. None of these motherfuckers wanted to hear that.
Oh yeah.
And I wasn't like, I wasn't trying to be condescending. I wasn't saying like, this is what I'm doing. At the time I had 2 kids. I've been working a full-time job as a truck driver and writing music and producing records and touring and composing and doing everything I could. And I just felt like I was going into this world where everybody was like, no, like I'm going to get like my master's in music and become like, the lead conductor of the LA Philharmonic or something, And I'm just kind of like.
There might be a few guys already in line for that one.
Yeah, a couple.
Yeah, a couple at least.
And I'm just I remember telling him, I was like, I'm being honest, because if you get a manual labor job, your mind is yours.
Right.
If you get a desk job, they got your mind. Because I did that for a long time. I was an investigator for a few years, and I worked for the auto club as an insurance claims adjuster. Those desk jobs, man, forget about it. Like you don't have any creativity when you're done with that. Like it takes it all away.
Interesting. Yeah.
But if you do a truck driving job or a warehouse job, something where it's sort of like you almost do it on a subroutine, man, I was a truck driver for 12 years. Psychic Temple 1, 2, 3, the music for airports record. I must have done 30 records in that time.
Yeah.
I wrote hundreds of songs.
Right.
A couple of video game soundtracks.
I know.
Yeah. And I took care of my family at the same time. Paid my rent. Didn't have to like ask anybody for help. It was just an interesting thing that made me think. Like if you have a family, but you also have this passion to do music, and you would rather not sacrifice what music means to you, if that's not a trade you want to make, and it's not one that I've wanted to make, then you just make up for it by just getting another job as well. And you just keep working on the music you want to do, so you don't have to work on the bad.
No, I totally get it. I mean, I worked for Edison one summer, and I was when I first started working out at Long Beach City College, so I guess I just graduated from high school, but I could see, working the day, it was just so fun to go play music at night.
Yeah.
And it actually, if I had to read light meters, so that meant that I was out all by myself. Not my best strength. My strength would have been if I would have worked on a ground crew. I'm like a fucking ace at being a helper or working in a workshop or with tools. And but that wasn't meant to be. I guess it was meant to be more just the music, but I would have totally loved, because I'm so good at tools and shit, of using or building stuff or being on a construction or something to where I could just go bang it out during the day, because that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing at all. That's actually a really good thing. And your music can kind of suffer when you have to make your money from your music, because you start making money concessions rather than artistic concessions.
Totally. I always think of it, the simple equation I always think about is you trade money for the muse.
Right.
And I would go hungry than do that, because I sort of feel like when the muse leaves, man, like.
Well, that's your thing. I mean, that's like, I lost my mojo.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
So I mean,
I've seen so many artists have that happen to them, right? If you have the subjective kind of thing, like, where you just look at somebody and you're like, man, these records are just incredible. And then it's like, whoa, what happened here? Like, these are all bad. Or sometimes I think, look, I know it's more complicated than just the muse left, but I think people will make sort of increasingly desperate decisions about their art if it's clouded by money, I don't know why. Earlier today, I don't know if you remember Jeff Parker, that we did that Alex Sadnick record with Jeff. Jeff posted about this old Shel Silverstein record where like the rhythm section for the album was like the Pharaohs, like the early Earth, Wind, and Fire, like rhythm section.
Oh, wow.
And like Little Walter on harmonica and all these crazy, like
Oh
Pete
my
Cozy on guitar
God.
and Maurice White on drums. It was this.
Yeah.
It was all done in Chicago.
Okay.
And then I immediately, you know, I'm a Phil Collins, like, you know, freak. So immediately I just thought, okay, wait, now we can connect Phil Collins to Shel Silverstein through like the Earth, Wind, and Fire horn section. But it made me think, you know, Jeff was like, this record's not good.
Okay.
and it made me think a lot about this other record that I had a very early kind of formative experience with. This is pre-internet, you know, but I used to just read everything I could about music, and then, you know, you can't find it, right? Like nowadays, you just type some shit in and you're like, well, there it is.
Not get a hold of anything, yeah.
But this was 20 years ago, and I was reading about this album called Question of Time, I think it is, by Jack Bruce. The lineup on this record was unbelievable, man. I mean, I think, you know, he had everybody from Cream on the record, so Clapton and Ginger Baker. This guy, Mark Nassif, who was this brilliant, like, drummer, percussionist. Vernon Reid from Living Colour, Alan Holdsworth, like Vivian Campbell from like Def Leppard, like all these just one after another. You're just like, whoa, what the fuck's going on? You know, this is incredible. I think maybe Will Calhoun from Living Colour, the drummer. All these incredible people, and I finally found the record at Fingerprints, UCD, and I listened to it, and I was like, this is the worst piece of shit I've ever heard. And it was such a bummer because I couldn't understand how you could have all those brilliant musicians and come up with something that didn't even have like 30 seconds of sublime quality, you know. Maybe at the time I didn't really even understand what a producer did, but now I almost like look back at that and I think like, maybe that was sort of the germ of like where I started thinking about like, you know, okay, yeah, getting all these people together is great, but
right,
then what?
Now what? Yeah.
You don't just get to like, you know, I mean, maybe this sort of like brings it back to the Dylan thing a little bit, but when I was talking with Gustavo, we were sort of rapping a little bit about Time Out of Mind, which is one of my favorite records.
I love that, yeah.
And there's this great quote from Lanois talking about like, you know, kind of pushing back against Dylan, some of his songs, you know, and he said something like, look, the world doesn't need another 2-note, you know, Bob Dylan melody.
Right.
And then Dylan sort of like, well, you know, he thought, you know, he was trying to make the song about like some, you know, cauldron of drum theory. But to me, this song is about like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And then Lanois sort of says something where he goes like, you know, I don't make halfway records. Either it's going to be a masterpiece or you got to get the fuck out of my face. Okay. And I just, to me, that is like exactly what record making is about. As hard as it may be to go to Bob Dylan and say this isn't good enough, right? Or Peter Gabriel, he did that on So, or anybody. You know, even when we're making records here in the studio, like I would treat a first-time, artist making their first album the same way, and I'd say this just isn't good enough. Every once in a while, you know, you have to realize, like, Jesus, man, I guess we do have to make some concessions in the moment because we got all these people in the studio, and
right.
You know, we're just gonna, you know, we only have 2 days to cut this thing.
Right. It's as good as it's gonna be for now. Okay.
I can't make them a better songwriter.
True.
In 5 minutes.
Right. No. Yeah, you can't relive their life or whatever.
Yeah. We try to take care of this shit in pre-production, but you know how that goes. You know, sometimes you make an agreement to say, I will do the best job for you that I can, but I'm not going to try to. I'm going to try to give you the best version of your work that I can.
Look. Back in the day, people got asked to come to the studio. Now, anybody with money could possibly buy studio time.
Right.
That doesn't mean that they're ready to be in the studio.
Right.
You know, what's that old silk purse out of a sow's ear,
right.
You know, lemons and lemonade or whatever, you know, or, you know, don't bring me a fish, bring me some fish hooks, you know, but, it's all a learning process, and whether you're big and famous or it's your first time out, you're just going to jump in the water and you're going to swim and grow from there. And so you might kind of suck, and nobody would come and ask you to make a record, so you can go and buy your own record time.
Yeah.
Nobody says you're going to make a hit or not make a hit, but you're going to grow and you're going to learn. I mean, you wouldn't believe how many people sitting there accompanying dance class, how many people would come in and just be awful.
Yeah.
And
awful dancers.
Awful.
Yeah.
Like what the fuck? Can you control your body at all? But that's not the point. That's not the point of what I'm saying, because people who stuck with it did get control,
right,
and did start to look really agile and really controlled and together on that floor. And that's kind of major transformation.
Right.
And that's just because they got into the program and they put one foot in front of the other on a repetitive daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, and they came out dancers. So, you just have to get in somewhere and start.
Yeah.
If you want to do it, you're going to have to. It doesn't get done if you don't do it. It's like, Art Blakey was out on the road because Art Blakey wanted to be out on the road. He told his manager, "Keep me booked until I'm freaking dead, dude."
Yeah.
It isn't some magic or wishing game or whatever. It's like, this artist wants to do this, they do it.
Well, so that actually, makes me think of Watt, actually, because he's somebody who, I think could have sort of like rested on his coattails, right? And he hasn't done that. In fact, we've made a few records together where I know he was like terrified. You know what I mean? And
sure,
he did it anyway.
Oh yeah, no.
And so I wonder, kind of like, so maybe where in your this timeline that I keep fucking up, do you kind of go from like Tom Waits to Mike Watt?
Yeah.
Kind of, where does Watt enter the picture?
Well, Watt. And I mean, it's like these people come and they go, and you may have a little bit of contact with them here and there, or you might do a bit of a tour or another record or what have you. But they come for in brief, intense moments, and then you kind of continue your life.
Right.
But with Mike, I guess it was in the later 90s, I think 97, that he made his first punk rock opera. And that was what we did. It was called Contemplating the Engine Room. And it was a really interesting concept. It was a piece of music that was depicting 24 hours, a 24-hour span of this one sailor's life, from in the morning to going out and coming back. Mm-hmm. He actually died in the opera, basically. Yeah. But it's got like Watt's life and where he was born, and his father, who was a chief,
right,
the highest non-commissioned officers in the Navy, chief.
Yeah.
And that's who Watt grew up with in Navy housing, was all the sons of all the chiefs in the Navy. So this was all about, and then it also, Watt likened the engine room to the van or the band room or the band practicing together.
Yeah.
So he had all these kind of things melding together as far as influences. And there was also D. Boone was definitely featured as part of the whole emotional...
Right, the catharsis of the whole thing.
It was, yeah, exactly. And so
you have, we go from like... You lived in Long Beach your whole life. Watts lived in Pedro his whole life, and you guys don't start playing music until around the mid '90s, late '90s.
Right. Well, we really were kind of in different worlds, because he was like the godfather of punk music, and he and Dean and Dee, and then Hurley, George Hurley had really emotionally really gotten a hold of people. I mean, they really had. They'd moved a lot of people with their brand, with their brand of the Minutemen, and so I knew of them, and I had friends who said, you should get together with Mike Watt, and so that actually did come to pass. But No, we were kind of like in parallel universes.
Right.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was, I had children and a wife, and he didn't. And I had the band with James and what have you. Still, probably. Yeah.
With Harmon.
Well, maybe at that point, maybe not anymore. It might have been John Hammond. I'm really bad chronologically
Yeah.
at remembering who. Watt is the one you can remember like
Details. Yeah.
like crazy. But the thing with Mike was that he knew I had some theater aspects and what have you, and he probably had heard some of the Tom Waits stuff or what have you, and just, I don't know, kind of out of the blue, just hollered at me, and then being able to have Nels Klein, who's just a charming person, great human.
Yeah.
And funny thing is that all the dance teachers knew his brother, who's a drummer, Alex. Yeah. And I didn't really realize they were both twins, but Alex was kind of doing the same thing I was doing, but up in LA where they lived.
Gotcha.
He was accompanying dance classes and getting into percussion and all sorts of stuff and sonics and what have you.
Yeah.
So anyway, getting to meet Nels and work with him was kind of like, oh yeah, I'm meeting people who they know about Tony Williams, or they know about John Coltrane,
Right.
or they know about John McLaughlin's guitar playing.
Yeah.
I knew a lot of blues guys, but that really wasn't the only thing I was about. That's where the gigs were. That's where the money was, and there's a lot to learn there. But that's one book.
Right.
There are many books
Totally.
of music, and so this was neat because Mike and Nels were bringing out other things that I really did like about music.
Right.
Nobody else was exercising that.
And so eventually this band is sort of called the Black Gang or something.
Yeah,
right?
Black
Is that
Gang
right?
Crew. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like but that was like black coffee, I think. Yeah, we're making coffee on the engine or something. But yeah.
Well, it's always
yeah.
got layers upon layers.
Yeah, and it's if you're a Waddy, you're keeping up with the journals and the stuff.
Yeah.
And he was just so he studied computer arts way before computers hit.
Yeah.
At Cal State. So he was like way ahead of the curve as far as computer communication and all that kind of stuff.
Such a wild combination of experiences and interests.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing.
Oh, I know. He's just he's a fountainhead of things. But the creativity, I mean, you got to, and he's always creating new works. But this whole thing had, it just had a lot of different varieties of grooves. And then I brought a sampler out on the road because we had like the surf hitting or the train coming into the station and all these things. I mean, it was pretty amazing, I bet, to be in the audience in some small club and these samples and the band and everything. So yeah.
And you guys toured as a 3-piece.
Yeah.
Wow.
But Nels didn't.
Okay.
Yeah. Joe Baiza did.
Okay.
Which was great. But but the studio was like the most charming part.
Yeah.
For sure. Was that we just really worked, and we did a lot. With Mike, we tuned the drums a lot to the key of the song.
Oh, right. Yeah. I've heard a lot of.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sort of like apocryphal stories about doing this, sort of just in studio, lore.
Uh-huh.
But very rarely have I actually seen it done.
Yeah. No, it has to be somebody has to come in and kind of help.
Yeah.
And so Mike would come in with his acoustic bass.
Yeah.
Like guitar bass, and he would be, finding the roots of the key and what have you, and then we would start playing around with the drums, and it's pretty amazing, and sometimes we tighten them up so much, but they still sounded fat, when you hit, especially the toms. I'm like, oh wow, I kind of learned a lot, because people tend to try to make their drums sound fat by tuning them too low, and then they don't have any attack. So yeah.
I was gonna, it's funny you mentioned this because I was thinking of it right when you said it. Is you said I learned a lot, and I kind of feel like one of the things that one of the reasons why maybe music never gets old for me is that as much as I learn and as much as I do it, every time I learn something. I learn something new, like with every performance or every record I make.
You know, when people watch music, it just seems so natural, and it's just like they think it's sort of machine-like almost. It's a human being controlling their body, keeping themselves centered on that goddamn drum stool, and keeping their arms organized, keeping their feet, there's a lot going on here.
The fingers, the wrists.
Yeah, that's just the basics, let alone, I'd love to learn this new scale or this new chord or create melodies that I'm going to do this instead of what I used to do. There's so many aspects, and you only need to know a little bit to get started. Just a little bit, and just be into it, and just get into the moment, and then move up the chain from there, But I mean, there's just so many aspects. If you're into it, you can never run out of stuff to learn.
Yeah.
It's just not possible. There's just too much to it,
I think that's why
people don't really get it, but
Yeah.
it's true. Once you get into it, it's just stirring up a whole pot of shit, man.
Yeah.
But that's the good part, in a way.
I noticed a few times when I was going to ask you about this, you sort of mentioned like the theatrical elements, and I know that I think I read at one point like you were sort of like a what is it? Not necessarily like a band leader, but you were involved in kind of like being like the director of like a performance troupe or something. Is that?
I guess we were. It was. We're just trying to get like a. I guess our version of a drum circle, but not just guys all playing the same beat, but just like drummers and maybe bass lines, or I don't know. It's just some. I think we called it Hodges' Big Drum. But yeah, there's still, that still lingers. I mean, just like. Rand called about Busker Fest, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And it's like, I don't have a band, right now or anything, and it just really got me off my ass, and the freaking minute the last note hit, I'm just like a million ideas to make it better, just flooded me. I was just like totally overwhelmed, swamped with how to fix a gazillion things and do a better job if I do it again or whatever, and so the guys in the band we play with Mavis, they were all like, I sweat once in a while with Mavis, but on my own gig, I sweat like about 8 times more than any other gig. Yeah. I mean, I totally get it, man. Yeah. It's like, it's like one thing to be behind somebody else's songs, but it's another thing to be kind of like in charge of the songs.
Oh, dude.
Yeah. But there's a payoff, so totally. It's totally worth it. Yeah.
I think we're probably going to run out in a few minutes, but there was one thing I wanted to ask you, because I haven't talked to you about this in the years that we've known each other, but I know that there's a kind of like, you've worked on a few film soundtracks, which seems like a very logical connection between theater and music. Yeah. And I was curious how, like, working on like the Twin Peaks stuff with David Lynch, how did that come about, and maybe where in our fucked up timeline did that fall? Was this post Tom Waits and pre Mike Watt, or I don't know.
I think it was pre Mike.
Okay.
But it was in the middle of Tom. Okay. It was like in 91, I think, something like that. And that happened. That really got started because of Dave Alvin.
Oh, okay, from the Blasters.
Yes, and who actually, he doesn't really play with the Blasters. He hasn't played with them. He does play with them sometimes. Yeah. But he hasn't played with them for almost 20 years. Right. Because
around that time.
Right. Yeah. Because he's really an illustrious songwriter, and his band isn't too loud, and they do have variety and a lot of things. But anyway, he he gave a good jolt of Fender guitar with reverb, and that's what Lynch liked. Right? He liked that Fender guitar and the reverb and what have you, tremolo possibly. So there was a movie, I guess, called Johnny Rocket that they kept trying to make or get music for. So for some reason, Dave Alvin got a hold of me and said, we're going up to David Lynch's house or to the studio, and we've been experimenting. You want to come along? And so we basically said, yeah. So we started doing this a few times. We would go up and play, with the big drums and what have you. And
Sure.
And then at one point, we were going to do some music for a Wim Wenders film. We'd do an Elvis song, Summer Kisses, Winter Tears, and Lynch wanted Dave Alvin to come back from San Francisco to do the session in the morning, and Alvin wouldn't come down because he wanted to rest. And so Lynch calls me and says, I need a guitar player. And so that became my childhood friend who just happened to be visiting right at that time, the first fucking awesome, amazing, genius guitar player that any of us in our crew ever met, David Jaricki. May he rest in peace. David was there, and we went up to Capitol Records with David Lynch. And I mean, he was just here for like a 2-day window, and he happened to be here. And we went up. He blew David's mind, Lynch's mind, which is just kind of John Lee Hooker kind of on a trance, on an ohm kind of thing.
So this is two Long Beach kids.
Yeah. And so we went up, and that's when we made the music for Fire Walk With Me, the Pink Room. He wanted a 3-note bass line.
Yeah.
The simplest shit in the world, but it's a part. It's crazy.
But I mean, Lynch is a musician
people copy
too.
it, yeah.
You know?
And well, he's like a great fifth Beatle too, because he can say, Hodges, do this, or David, play this part up an octave or down an octave, or he's good at like, oh, okay, yeah, but how about try this or that, so he can help us get our sights set. Because a lot of times we're going in and we don't even know the words yet to the song. We're just making songs out of the air.
Yeah, whole cloth.
Yeah,
right.
and so you need